Eric was never a weak man. That's important to understand. He wasn't fragile, wasn't the type to complain, wasn't someone who'd crumble under pressure. He built things with his hands, fixed his own car, worked long hours without a word of complaint. When life hit him, he stood there and took it. That's who he was. That's who he used to be. Because the first thing I noticed wasn't something obvious. It wasn't dramatic. It was just absence, a kind of fading. At first, it looked like exhaustion. He'd sit longer than usual after work, staring at nothing, like his mind hadn't caught up with his body. His movements slowed down, not drastically, just enough that if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. But I was paying attention. Fathers notice these things, even when they don't want to. Long week. I asked him one evening while we sat at the table. He blinked like he hadn't heard me the first time. Then, after a pause that lasted just a second too long, he nodded. Yeah, just tired. That pause stayed with me. It echoed. Because tired men don't need to think about whether they're tired. They just know. Then came the forgetfulness. Keys left in the door. The stove left on. He missed a meeting at work. Something he had never done in his entire career. His boss called me, not him, because Eric didn't answer his phone. When I asked him about it, he frowned. I thought it was tomorrow. It wasn't. And the way he said it, it wasn't careless. It was confused. That was the difference. Carelessness has a kind of laziness to it. This had something else. Something slipping. And through all of it, Kate was there. Always there. At first, I told myself she was just being supportive. That's what a good wife does, right? She steps in when things get hard. She fills the gaps. She holds things together. But there's a line between support and control. And Kate didn't just cross that line. She erased it. She answered questions before Eric could open his mouth. How are you feeling? I'd ask. He's fine. She'd respond instantly, her hand resting on his shoulder. Not gently, firmly, like a reminder or a warning. I started testing it. Small things. Eric, did you take your medication today? He'd open his mouth, and she'd cut in. Yes, of course he did. I manage all of that. Manage. That word again. I noticed how she emphasized it. How she positioned herself between him and everyone else. Even me. One afternoon, I tried something different. I showed up unannounced. I wanted to catch him alone. No filters. No interruptions. Just my son and me. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. I found him in the garage, sitting on a stool, staring at the floor like he was waiting for something that wasn't coming. Tools were scattered around him, untouched. This was a man who couldn't sit still 5 minutes without fixing something. Now he wasn't moving at all. Eric, I said. He looked up slowly. Too slowly. Hey, Dad. There was a delay in his voice. A lag. Like his thoughts had to travel a longer distance just to reach his mouth. I stepped closer. What are you doing out here? He glanced around, confused. I was gonna fix the... something. He didn't even know. That's when the cold feeling in my chest turned into something sharper. Fear. Real fear. I crouched in front of him. Look at me, I said quietly. He did. But his eyes, they weren't right. There was a fog behind them. A dullness. Like someone had dimmed the lights inside his head. You're not okay, I told him. He blinked. I think I am. Think. Again. Always that hesitation. That uncertainty. I lowered my voice even more. We need to get you checked. Properly. Not just quick visits. Real tests. You understand me? For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw clarity in his face. Like something inside him was trying to surface. Yeah, maybe. The door behind me opened. And just like that, it was gone. Kate stood there. Perfect timing. Too perfect. Jack, she said, her voice calm, controlled, measured. He's resting. You shouldn't push him. I stood up slowly. I'm not pushing him. I'm talking to my son. Her expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. And I'm taking care of my husband, she replied. He doesn't need stress right now. Stress. That's what she called concern. That's what she called a father trying to understand why his son looked like he was disappearing in front of him. I stepped closer to her, lowered my voice. There's something wrong with him. She held my gaze, unblinking. No, she said softly. There isn't. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't denying it because she didn't see it. She was denying it because she didn't want anyone else to see it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every word, every pause. Something was wrong. Not just with Eric. With everything. The symptoms didn't add up cleanly. The timing didn't make sense. And Kate's behavior, it wasn't protective. It was controlled, calculated. The next morning, I made a decision. If no one was going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. The moment everything broke. It was a normal day. That's what makes it stick in my mind. No warning. No build-up. Just routine. I walked out to my car, keys in hand, thinking about nothing in particular. And then I saw it. Something small. Something most people would have ignored. A black shape under the rear bumper, tucked just out of sight. Too clean to be random. Too precise to be accidental. I crouched down slowly, my heartbeat picking up though I didn't yet know why. When I reached under and pulled it free, I felt it immediately. Weight, design, intent. It wasn't junk. It wasn't debris. It was a tracker. Small, magnetic, professional. The kind of thing you don't buy unless you know exactly what you're doing. Or exactly what you're planning. I stood there in the driveway, holding it in my hand, and everything inside me went still. Completely still. Because in that moment, one thought pushed through everything else. This isn't about Eric being sick. This is something else. Something deliberate. I didn't call anyone. Didn't confront Kate. Didn't make a scene. Instinct told me that would be the worst thing I could do. Instead, I played along. I got in the car, placed the tracker on the passenger seat, and drove. No destination. No plan. Just distance. Miles turned into hours. The road stretched out in front of me like an escape I wasn't sure would work. Every now and then, I'd glance at the device. Sitting there. Silent. But not inactive. 2 hours later, I stopped at a gas station across state lines. Picked a random truck in the lot. Opened the back when no one was looking. And dropped the tracker inside. Let it go. Let it travel. Let whoever was watching me lose me. The drive back felt different. Heavier. Like I had crossed a line I didn't fully understand yet. I got home. Parked. Went inside. Waited. It didn't take long. A few hours at most. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Slowly. Carefully. There was no introduction. No hesitation. Just a voice. Cold. Controlled. Angry. You shouldn't have done that. Silence filled the space between us. Thick. Pressurized. Then the voice came again. Lower this time. More dangerous. We know where you are. And just like that, everything changed. Because that wasn't a guess. That wasn't confusion. That was certainty. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, heart pounding hard enough to make my vision blur. And in that moment, all the pieces started to connect. Eric's condition, Kate's control, the isolation, the tracker. This wasn't a family issue. This wasn't illness. This was something planned. Something hidden. Something I had just exposed, without understanding how deep it went. And the worst part? I had no idea who was on the other end of that call, or how long they had been watching. I didn't respond to the voice. I didn't ask questions. Because instinct told me something simple, something absolute. Anyone who says, "We know where you are," doesn't need a conversation. They need control. And I had just taken a piece of that control away. The line went dead. No goodbye. No warning. No second chance. Just silence. But it wasn't empty silence. It was the kind that lingers. The kind that watches back. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that. Phone still in my hand. Listening to nothing. And thinking about everything. Eric wasn't just sick. He was being handled, managed, controlled. And now I had proof, indirect but real, that someone out there didn't like me interfering. That's when I understood something else. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet, because I didn't have anything solid. A tracker? Could be explained away. A phone call? No number. No identity. And Kate? She already had control of the narrative. If I made a move too early, I wouldn't just fail. I'd lose access to Eric completely. So I did the only thing I could. I stayed quiet, and I started watching. The next few days I played my role. Concerned father. Nothing more. I visited Eric like I always did. Sat with him, talked to him, listened. But this time, I paid attention to everything. His hands trembled more. Subtle but worse. His speech slowed even further. Words came out like they were being dragged through something thick. And the confusion, it wasn't random anymore. Came in waves. Predictable ones. That's what caught my attention. Predictable. Not natural. I started keeping track. Times. Moments. Patterns. When he seemed worse. When he seemed clearer. When Kate was around. When she wasn't. And the pattern was there. Clear as day once I saw it. Eric got worse. After she gave him his medicine. I noticed the routine. Same time every day. Same glass. Same small pills. Always handed to him by Kate. Never self-administered. Never questioned. One evening I tested it. "Let me see what he's taking," I said casually. Kate didn't hesitate. Didn't stutter. Didn't even blink. "Just supplements," she said, already moving toward the cabinet. "Doctor prescribed. Nothing serious." She showed me the bottles. Labels. Names. Everything looked normal. Too normal. I picked one up. Read it. Turned it in my hand. "Mind if I take a closer look?" I asked. She smiled. That same calm, controlled smile. Of course. But something in her eyes changed. Just slightly. Enough for me to notice. I handed it back. Didn't push. Not yet. Because now I knew something more important. She was ready for questions. Prepared. Which meant she had something to hide. That night I didn't go home. I stayed in my car down the street. Watched the house. Lights on. Lights off. Movement. Patterns. Hours passed. Nothing unusual. Until, around midnight, the garage light flicked on. I leaned forward in my seat. Heart steady. Focused. Kate stepped out. Alone. No hesitation. No checking around. Like she knew no one would be watching. She got into her car. Drove off. I waited 10 seconds. Then followed. She didn't drive far. That was the first surprise. No long trip. No hidden location across town. Just 10 minutes away. An old part of the city. Industrial. Quiet. Forgotten. She pulled into a narrow alley. Parked in front of something that barely looked like a building anymore. An old garage. Rust on the doors. Windows dark. No sign. No activity. But she had a key. I watched as she got out, walked up, and unlocked it without hesitation. Like she had done it many times before. The door creaked open just enough for her to slip inside. Then it closed behind her. And the street went silent again. I didn't move. Didn't rush. Didn't make a mistake. Because now I knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. I memorized the location. Every detail. Every angle. Then I left. The next day, everything changed again. Noah came to see me. My grandson. Eric's boy. He wasn't supposed to be there. Kate didn't like him visiting me alone. Didn't like anyone outside her control. But he showed up anyway. Quiet. Nervous. Looking over his shoulder like he expected someone to be watching. "Grandpa," he said, his voice low. Too low. I knelt down slightly. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. Just reached into his pocket. Pulled out a folded piece of paper. And pressed it into my hand. "Don't let Mom see," he whispered. "Mom. Not Kate. Mom." I felt something twist in my chest. "What is this?" I asked. He shook his head. "I can't say. She'll know." No. I unfolded the paper slowly, carefully. An address. My stomach dropped, because I already recognized it. The garage. I looked back at Noah. His eyes were wide, afraid, but more than that, certain. "Why did you give me this?" I asked quietly. He swallowed. Hard. "Because Dad's getting worse," he said. "And she says it's normal. But it doesn't feel normal." Neither did this. None of it did. I put a hand on his shoulder. Firm. Reassuring. "You did the right thing," I told him. But inside, I already knew what this meant. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This wasn't just patterns and instincts. Now I had a location, a witness, connection, and whatever was inside that garage was the truth, or something worse. That night I didn't hesitate. I went back. Same street, same silence, same rusted door. But this time, I wasn't just watching. I was going inside, and I had no idea what I was about to find. I waited until the street went dead. No headlights, no footsteps, no voices leaking through cracked windows. Just the old industrial block sitting under a sick yellow streetlight, all rust and shadow and forgotten concrete. The garage stood at the end of the alley like a sealed mouth. I parked 2 streets over and walked the rest of the way. Every step felt too loud. My breathing sounded wrong in my own ears. Not because I was afraid of being caught, though I was, but because some part of me already knew that once I opened that door, I would never be able to go back to being just a worried father. Worry still leaves room for denial. Proof does not. I reached the garage and stood there for a moment, looking at the lock. It was old, but not neglected. Scratches around the metal. Fresh oil on the hinge. Someone used this place often enough to maintain the parts that mattered, while letting the outside rot so nobody would look twice. That was Kate. Pretty surface when she wanted one. Decay everywhere else. I used a thin pry bar from my coat and worked carefully, slowly, swallowing every curse when the metal groaned. The lock resisted. Then it gave. The sound was small, but to me it cracked the whole world open. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. The smell hit first. Chemical. Bitter. Clean in a way that didn't belong in a garage. Not gasoline. Not oil. Not dust. Something sharper. Something deliberate. I clicked on the small flashlight in my hand and swept it across the room. First, it looked ordinary. Shelves. Boxes. Old tires. A tarp thrown over something bulky in the corner. But then the beam caught the table against the back wall, and my blood went cold. It wasn't a workbench. It was a station. Neat rows of sealed containers. Small bags with handwritten labels. Measuring tools. Gloves. Notebooks stacked in a plastic bin. A locked metal case sitting half open, as if whoever had used it last had been interrupted or careless enough to believe no one would ever come looking. I moved toward it like a man walking into his own nightmare. The first notebook had Kate's handwriting. I knew it instantly. I had seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, little notes stuck to Eric's refrigerator. That same careful handwriting. That same pretty control. Only now it wasn't saying happy birthday. It was tracking my son's decline. Dates, times, symptoms, reactions, sleep, confusion, weakness. I stood there reading page after page, and something inside me began to tear. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the slow, quiet violence of a rope splitting fiber by fiber. She had been documenting him, not caring for him, documenting him, like a project, like a problem she was solving, like a body she was waiting on. There were notes about his meals, notes about when he was clearer, notes about when he was too alert, notes about adjusting the schedule so nobody would become suspicious. Nobody. That word sat there on the page like a confession. I thought of Eric in the garage, staring at the floor. I thought of his voice dragging itself through fog. I thought of Kate's hand on his shoulder, firm, warning him without words. My knees almost buckled, but I didn't let them. Fathers don't fall apart when their children are still in danger. They become stone. I took pictures of everything. Every page, every bottle, every label, every corner of that room. My hands shook, but I kept going. Then I found the second folder. Debt records. credit card statements, loan notices, final warnings, numbers circled in red, names I didn't recognize, amounts so large they looked unreal under the flashlight. Kate was drowning, not struggling, drowning, and Eric had become the shore she planned to swim toward. At the bottom of the folder were insurance documents. My son's name, Eric Morris, large policy, recent changes, then another, Noah, my grandson. I stared at that page longer than I should have, because my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. Noah was 12, a boy who still left his sneakers untied. A boy who slipped me a note with trembling fingers because he knew something was wrong in his own house. And she had insured him too. I felt rage then. Not hot. Hot rage burns fast and makes fools of men. This was cold, deep, clean. The kind of rage that doesn't scream because it is already deciding what must be done. I put everything back exactly where I found it. Then I left. The alley looked the same when I stepped outside. But I wasn't the same man walking out of it. I drove straight to the hospital the next morning. Not Kate's doctor. Not her friend. A different doctor. A real one, I told myself. Someone who would listen. I brought photos, notes, copies. I explained as calmly as I could. I told them my son was being harmed. I told them his wife was controlling his medication. I told them I had found evidence. The doctor listened. First. Then his face changed. Not disbelief exactly. Professional distance. The kind people wear when they decide you might be unstable. Mr. Morris, he said carefully. These are very serious accusations. I know what they are, I said. That's why I'm here. We would need direct testing. Your son's consent. A proper chain of evidence. Then test him. He hesitated. And that hesitation told me Kate had already built walls I hadn't seen yet. She says he's anxious around you, he said. My throat tightened. Who says? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Kate had been there first. Of course she had. By afternoon, she called me. Her voice was soft, almost wounded. Jack, what are you doing? I stood in my kitchen, staring out the window. You know exactly what I'm doing. A small pause. Then she sighed, like I was exhausting her. Eric is sick. You are making it worse. You're scaring Noah. You're harassing doctors. This has to stop. I laughed once. It didn't sound like me. You're poisoning my son. Silence. For 1 second, there was no act. No performance. Just the empty space where her mask slipped. Then she whispered, "Be very careful." The next day, the papers arrived. Restraining order. Temporary but real. I was not to contact Kate. Not to approach her home. Not to interfere with Eric's care. Not to contact Noah without permission. She had done it. She had turned my love into a threat. My fear into madness. My evidence into obsession. And the doctor, her friend, the one she trusted, the one who kept signing off on Eric's decline, had backed her statement. I read the order 3 times. Then I set it on the table. My hands were still, strangely still, because now the game was clear. She didn't just want Eric isolated. She wanted me legally removed. She wanted the last person willing to fight for him standing outside the walls, shouting at a house that no longer had to open its doors. I should have broken then. Maybe any sane man would have. But I had spent my life loving Eric through storms, through mistakes, through years when he thought he didn't need me. I had watched him become a man. I had held Noah when he was born. I had buried my wife with Eric standing beside me, both of us pretending we were stronger than we were. Kate didn't know that kind of bond. She thought paperwork could sever it. She thought a judge's signature could make me stop being a father. She was wrong. That night, I spread everything across my dining table. Photos from the garage, copies of the notes, insurance records, debt statements, the restraining order, a map of everyone connected to her. And in the middle of it all, one picture of Eric from years ago. Healthy, smiling, Noah on his shoulders, sunlight behind them. I looked at that picture until my vision blurred. Then I made my decision. I would not argue anymore. I would not beg doctors who had already chosen comfort over courage. I would not throw myself against Kate's walls just to prove I was innocent while my son kept fading behind them. No, I would become quiet, quieter than her, more patient than her, more careful than anyone believed an old man could be. And I would catch her, not with accusations, not with panic, with proof. The kind even her friend couldn't explain away. The kind police couldn't ignore. The kind that would drag the truth into daylight, whether Kate was ready or not. I picked up Noah's note again. That folded little piece of paper. That tiny act of courage from a boy trapped inside a house full of lies. And I understood something that hurt more than anything else. Noah had trusted me because he had no one else. Eric couldn't fight. Noah couldn't fight. So it had to be me. I sat there until dawn, the house dark around me. The evidence spread like ashes across the table. By morning, I no longer felt like a father begging to be believed. I felt like a witness, and a witness has one duty: to survive long enough to tell the truth. So I began planning, silently, carefully, because Kate had made one mistake. She thought the restraining order removed me from the board. But all it did was teach me the rules. And once I understood the rules, I knew exactly how to break her without breaking the law. The next time I moved, I would not miss. Not again. I started with the substance. Not accusations. Not theories. The substance. Because feelings can be dismissed. Fear can be mocked. An old man's suspicion can be painted as grief, obsession, delusion. But chemistry doesn't care who cries. Chemistry tells the truth. I still had a tiny sample from the garage, sealed in a plastic evidence bag I had bought from a private investigator's supply store 3 towns over. I had taken it with gloves, careful not to contaminate it, careful not to take enough for Kate to notice. Just a dusting, just a whisper of powder. Enough. I sent it to an independent lab under a false explanation. I didn't say murder. I didn't say poisoning. I said contamination concern. Unknown household substance. Private test. Then I waited. Those were the longest days of my life. Because while I waited, Eric kept fading. I saw him only from a distance now. Restraining order. That phrase had become a fence around my son's life. I'd park at the edge of the street, just far enough to stay legal, and watch the house where my boy was being slowly erased. Sometimes I saw Kate through the curtains. Sometimes I saw Noah's face in the upstairs window, pale and frightened. But Eric barely appeared anymore. And every time I didn't see him, I wondered if I was already too late. That thought lived inside me like a nail. Then the lab report came. I sat at my kitchen table before opening it, my hands flat against the wood. For a long time, I simply stared at the envelope. Because once I read it, there would be no more doubt. And doubt, as painful as it is, still leaves a man one mercy: hope. I opened it. Read the first page. Then the second. Then I stopped breathing for a moment. Poison. Not in dramatic words. Not in language fit for movies. Just clinical terms. Toxic compounds. Dangerous exposure. Progressive symptoms. Possible neurological impairment. There it was. Cold. Printed. Undeniable. Kate was poisoning Eric. I lowered the paper slowly, and something inside me went quiet. Not calm. Quiet. Like the world had stepped back to give room to what had to happen next. I didn't go to the police immediately. I wanted to. God help me. I wanted to kick down every door between me and Eric and drag Kate out by the truth itself. But I had learned. Kate had allies. Kate had a doctor willing to nod along while my son weakened. Kate had already made me look unstable once. If I walked in with powder from a garage I had entered illegally, she would twist it. She would say I planted it. Say I stalked her. Say grief had eaten my mind. And maybe the police would listen. Maybe they wouldn't. I couldn't gamble Eric's life on maybe. So I needed more. I needed her voice. I needed her admitting what she was. That meant getting close without getting near. That meant using the one thing Kate never expected me to have left: patience. I found out about the debt first. Real debt. Ugly debt. Not credit card worry. Not temporary hardship. Collapse. Loans stacked on loans. Collections. Private lenders. Missed payments. Threatening letters. A life built on borrowed time and polished lies. Kate wasn't just greedy. She was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. The insurance policies confirmed it. Eric's policy had been increased twice. Noah's had been opened quietly, hidden under language about family security. Family security. I almost tore the page in half when I read that. Noah was not security. He was a child. My grandson. Her son. And that was when my fear changed shape. Because until then, I had believed Eric was the target. Now I understood Noah was part of the plan too. Maybe later. Maybe only if things got worse. Maybe if Eric didn't bring enough money to satisfy the hole she had dug. But his name was there. On paper. Beside a number. That was enough. I contacted an attorney next. Quietly. I told him only what I could prove. I showed him the lab report, the photos, the insurance papers, the restraining order, the doctor's connection to Kate. He didn't smile. Didn't promise miracles. Good. I didn't trust people who promised miracles anymore. He simply said, "You need an admissible recording or a direct emergency event." Direct emergency event. Those words made my stomach turn. Because I knew what they meant. Wait until she tried again. Let the snake open its mouth. Then strike. So I built the trap. Not with wires from spy movies. Nothing dramatic. A legal recording set up through a private investigator, one who knew the state laws, one who knew exactly where I could stand, what I could capture, what would hold up when Kate started crying for an audience. Noah helped more than I wanted him to. I hated that. A boy should not have to become brave because the adults around him have become monsters. But he slipped messages when he could. Tiny notes. Times. Words he overheard. His father's condition. When Kate gave medicine. When the doctor visited. One note nearly broke me. Dad said he doesn't want it, but she made him. I read that sentence until the paper blurred. Then I folded it and put it with the others. No more waiting than necessary. The chance came 3 nights later. Kate called someone from the back porch. The investigator picked it up from a legal distance. I sat in the van beside him, headphones on, my heart beating like a hammer wrapped in cloth. Kate's voice came through softly. Annoyed. Not scared. Annoyed. "He's getting worse faster now," she said. A man answered. The doctor. I knew his voice from the hospital. "You need to slow down." "I can't," Kate snapped. "The payment deadlines are coming. The policy needs to clear before everything collapses." My hands curled into fists. The investigator looked at me once. I didn't move. The doctor said something about symptoms, about dosage, about keeping records consistent. Then Kate laughed. Laughed. Not loudly. Just a small breath through her nose, as if Eric's fading body was an inconvenience. "I can handle Jack," she said. "The old man already looks crazy. One more complaint and I'll bury him in court." There it was. All of it. The plan. The motive. The conspiracy. Her voice. His voice. The truth finally dragged out of the dark. But it still wasn't over. Because then she said, "Tomorrow morning, I'll give him the final adjustment." Final adjustment. The words went through me like winter. The investigator started talking, something about police, warrants, emergency action. I barely heard him. All I heard was tomorrow morning. My son did not have tomorrow morning to spare. By dawn, everything was in motion. Attorney. Investigator. Police contact. Lab report. Recording. Copies of every document. For once, the machine moved. Not fast enough for a father. But moving. Still, I didn't trust it. Not fully. Because systems are made of people and people hesitate. Kate didn't. So I went too. I stayed outside the legal boundary until officers arrived nearby. I watched the house through the windshield. Every nerve in my body pulled tight. The morning was gray. Wrongly peaceful. Birds sang. I hated them for it. Through the front window, I saw Kate enter the living room with a glass of water and a small white cup in her hand. Eric sat in the chair. Slumped. Barely there. My son. My boy. The man I had taught to ride a bike, to shave, to stand back up when life humiliated him. He reached for the cup, and something in me broke clean. I ran. I heard someone shout behind me. Maybe an officer. Maybe my own name. I didn't care. I crossed the yard, hit the porch, slammed my shoulder into the door hard enough to send pain down my arm. The door burst inward. Kate spun around. Eric looked up slowly, confused. The cup was inches from his mouth. I crossed the room and knocked it from his hand. It hit the floor. White pills scattered. Water spilled across the wood like a small, shining confession. Kate screamed, "He's violating the order!" But this time, nobody listened to her first. Police came in behind me. Real police. Not her doctor. Not her lies. Not her careful little world. For the first time, Kate looked afraid. Not shocked. Afraid. Because she knew. The officer asked her to step back. She tried to speak. Tried to cry. Tried to shape herself into a victim. But then they played the recording. Only a piece of it. Enough. Her face changed. The mask didn't crack. It vanished. And underneath it was nothing human I wanted to recognize. The doctor was arrested that afternoon. Kate too. Noah was taken safely to my house, wrapped in a blanket even though it wasn't cold. He sat on my couch without speaking for nearly an hour. Then he asked, "Is Dad going to die?" I sat beside him. I wanted to lie. I wanted to be the kind of grandfather who could promise safety with a steady voice. But lies had already poisoned that family enough. So I told him, "He's alive, and we're going to fight for him." Eric survived. Not quickly. Not cleanly. Recovery was not a sunrise. It was a long hallway with bad lights. Some days he knew everything. Some days he cried because pieces of his own life were missing. Some days he apologized to me for not seeing it sooner, and every time he did, I told him the same thing. "You were the victim, son, not the fool." Noah stayed safe. That mattered most. Kate went from silk blouses and soft lies to handcuffs and silence. The doctor lost everything he had sold his soul to protect. And me? I became the man people later said had gone too far. Maybe I did. Maybe breaking rules, crossing lines, watching from shadows, trusting nobody but myself. Maybe all of that made me dangerous. But I know this. My son is alive. My grandson is safe. And the woman who nearly took them both is no longer standing between them and the truth. So I'll ask you plainly. When everyone tells you to calm down, when the doctors dismiss you, when the papers say stay away, when the person hurting your family smiles like a saint, what are you supposed to do? Obey? Or fight? Because sometimes, to save your family, you have to go against everyone. And trust only yourself.